to Lesson 22. Lesson 22 is found in your books on pages 58 and 59. Salvete amici latine. Thank you, surgite. In coro recitemus. Personal and tense endings. Ost mus tisint. Bombos bot bamus batus bont. Bobis bit bimus bitus bunt. Isti it imus istis erunt. Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. Ero, eris, erit, eramus, eritus, erit. First conjugation principal part endings. O, ari, avi, atus. And amo principal parts. Amo, amari, amavi, amatus. Amo, six tenses. Amo, amas, amat, amamus, amatus, amat. Amabam, amabas, amabat, amabamus, amabatus, amabat. Amabo, amabis, amabit. Amabamus, amabatus, amabunt. Amavi, amavisti, amavit, amavimus, amavistus, amaverud. Amavaram, amavaras, amavarat, amavaramus, amavaratus, amavarant. Amavaro, amavaris, amavarit, amaveramus, amaveritus, amavarant. Do, sto, uvo, lavo, principal parts. Do, dari, dedi, datus. Sto, stari, steti, status. Uvo, uvari, uvi, utus. Lavo, lavari, lavi, lautus. Sum, six tenses. Sum, ss, sumus, estis, sunt. Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. Ero, eris, erit, eramus, eritus, erunt. Fui, fuisti, fuit, fuimus, fuistis, fuerunt. Fueram, fueras, fuerat, fueramus, fueratus, fuerant. Fuero, fueris, fuerit, fueramus, fueritus, fuerint. And sum, principal parts. Sum, esse, fui, futuris. Case names, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. Mensa, mensae. Mensa, mensae, mensae, mensa, mensa, mensae, mensarum, mensis, mensas, mensis, servus, servi, servus, servi, servo, servum, servo, servi, servorum, servis, servo, servis, bellum, belli, bellum, belli, bello, bellum, bello, bella, bellorum, bellis, bella, bellis. Bonus, bonus, bona, bonum, boni, bone, boni, bono, bone, bono, bonum, bonam, bonum. Bono, bona, bono, boni, bone, bona, bonorum, bonarum, bonorum, bonis, 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 bonos, bonas, bona, bonis, bonis, bonis. Unus duo, tres, quator, quinque, sex, septem, octo, novem, decem. Primus secundus, tertius, quartus, quintus, sextus, septimus, octavus, nonus, decimus. Pater, patris. Pater, patris, patri, patrem, patre, patres, patrum, patribus, patres, patribus. Great job, sedate. In the last lesson, we learned how important the genitive singular ending is. Do you remember the two very important things that the genitive singular does for us? First of all, it helps us identify the declension we're in, yes, and second of all, it helps us determine our stem. Very good. So again, the genitive singular ending is very important. And what is the genitive singular ending for the third declension? It is is. Great job. Now today we're going to continue learning about the third declension. So this lesson will actually be relatively easy for you and you'll have time to really solidify those third declension endings and declining in the third declension. However, before we begin doing that, let's look, of course, at our Latin saying. Our Latin saying for this week is Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Say that with me. Pax Romana, the Roman peace. So Pax Romana was an era of peace and prosperity in the Roman Empire. It began with the rule of Caesar Augustus, and it continued for about 200 years. This was the time in history when Christ was born. So you can see how God certainly providentially ordained this time in history to be the time when Jesus, the Messiah, would be born because of the peace and prosperity and the way that Christianity would be able to spread throughout the Roman Empire. The British Empire was also referred to during its climax as Pax Britannica, and sometimes people refer to the new order of the world as Pax Americana, so you may hear those terms also used. One more time, say this Latin saying with me. Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Now this Latin saying is another great example of how third declension nouns can be used along with first and second declension adjectives. So pox, of course, is one of our third declension nouns. It's one of the nouns that we'll be learning in this week's vocabulary list. And Romana is a first and second declension adjective. Romanus aum. Actually, Romanus means Roman, and that word can be used as a noun also, but in this case it's being used as an adjective, right? What kind of peace? Roman peace. So here again is a great example of how, as long as a noun and an adjective agree in gender, number, and case, it doesn't matter if they're in the same declension or not. All right, let's move on. As I said before, we are going to be talking again about third declension, masculine and feminine. So if you look at the grammar chart, you will notice that the declension of lex is no different than pater. The endings are still the same. Do you see how there's still a dash or a blank for the nominative singular ending? Yes, that's because, remember, the nominative singular can be so variable. The spelling is not consistent, so we always, again, look at that genitive singular ending to determine our stem, and when we're reciting the third declension endings, we simply say blank in place of an ending. And you'll see again, as you look at our vocabulary list, that we have multiple endings for the nominative singular. Sometimes is, sometimes an X, sometimes simply an S or an L. So look at all the variation that is there. However, we are going to discover some patterns today that will hopefully help you understand the gender of some of these nouns. All right, so let's get right into, again, just reviewing and solidifying the third declension case endings and declining in the third declension. Ready? Go ahead and listen as I decline lex for you. Lex, legis, legi, legem, lege, leges, legum, legibus, leges, legibus. Ready? Again, listen as I decline lex for you. Lex, legis, legi, legem, lege, leges, legum, legibus, leges, legibus. Now, did you notice how the pronunciation switched a little bit when we got to legum? So this is a good week also for you to remember that when you are pronouncing G and C, they make the soft sound before E, I, and A-E. And they make the hard sound before A, O, and U. So because the G is preceding a U in legum, we pronounce that G with a hard sound. Now let's go ahead and recite our third declension endings one more time. And remember, the nominative singular will be blank. Ready? Blank, is, e-m-a, ace, ibus, ace, ibus. One more time to make sure we have that down. Blank, is, e-m-a, ace, ibus, ace, ibus. All right, great. So you should be able to decline now any third declension noun simply by finding the stem, and you find the stem by dropping the is ending in the genitive singular and then adding these third declension case endings that we just recited. Great, let's talk a little bit more about gender. So remember that third declension nouns are different than our first and second declension nouns because they don't have gender endings in the nominative singular, such as us, and All right, so you have to memorize the gender of each third declension noun. However, there are some patterns. For example, sometimes you will just simply see that the words have natural gender, and we saw that in the last vocabulary list for lesson number 21, didn't we? So dukes and rakes and frater and pater all were naming male persons, so they were masculine, and soror and mater were naming female persons, so they were feminine. In this list, we're going to see that none of the words have natural gender. They have instead, remember, what's called grammatical gender. All right. However, we do see some patterns. So for this week's vocabulary list, you will notice that the words that end in X in the nominative singular are feminine, such as crux and lex and lux and pox. Those are all feminine. Oh, and vokes also. I forgot about vokes. So crux, lex, lux, pox, and vokes are all feminine. They end in X, and that is generally a good rule. Now, in the last lesson, we saw that rakes and dukes were masculine, but that's because they had natural gender, right? Leader and king. A leader was a male person in the Roman world, and a king is obviously a male person. Natural gender trumps all other genders, remember. In this lesson, though, all the words that end in X are feminine, and that is a general rule to follow, unless, of course, the word has natural gender. All right, so as we are going through some of our third declension nouns, even though the spelling does vary, you will notice patterns such as the one I just pointed out to you. All right, let's go through these vocabulary words, and I'll read them. And remember, because these are third declension nouns, we have to say out the entire genitive singular, and you have to learn to write it out and spell it correctly also. So I will say the word, and I'll have you repeat it. One more thing for me to point out about these words before we get into reciting our vocabulary list is the first one, canis, canis. So canis means dog, and you'll notice that for the gender, it can be either masculine or feminine. So all of these nouns have grammatical gender except canis. Canis can be either masculine or feminine because dogs can be either male or female, can't they? All right, so again, I will say the word, I'll pause and let you repeat it, and we will include the gender. Canis, canis, masculine or feminine, dog. Crux, crucis, feminine, cross. Lex legis, feminine, law. Lux, lucis, feminine, light. Mos, morris, masculine, custom. Panis, panis, masculine, bread. Pax, pacis, feminine, peace. Pace, pedis, masculine, foot. Sol, solus, masculine, sun. Vox, vocis, feminine, voice. Great job! Let's go back through and look at derivatives now. So for canis, canis, a derivative would be canine, which is a word referring to dogs. For crux, crucis, which means cross, we have the derivative crucify, and crucifixion was a form of Roman execution. For lex legis, which means law, we have the word legal, and this, of course, is referring to the law, something that has to do with the law. For lux, lucis, which means light, we have two derivatives, lucid and lucifer. Something that is lucid is something that is clear, and Lucifer is a word for Satan. It's a name for Satan, which may sound odd as you think about how lux means light, but Satan, before he fell from heaven, was an angel at one point. He's a fallen angel, so he was once a glorious being before he fell from heaven. For mos, morris, we have moral. A moral is a value, something that you determine is right and appropriate, a virtue, the right way of behaving. For panis, panis, which means bread, we have companion, and the root for panis is found in the middle of that word, isn't it? A companion is simply a friend. A friend is usually someone you break bread with, don't you? Or you have dinner with, you eat with. For pax pacis, which means peace, we have the word Pacific. It's not capitalized here in your derivative, but you probably are aware that the Pacific Ocean is one of our major oceans, a major body of water. It's kind of an interesting word. I don't really think of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, as being peaceful necessarily. There can be lots of storms, even severe storms like tsunamis, but Pacific does mean peace. It refers to peace. And another good derivative is pacifier, something that a baby uses to soothe it and to calm it down. You can see how that word would be connected to peace, can't you? For pace, pedit, which means foot, we have the word pedal. So you use pedals on your bicycle to get your bicycle moving. We use them in cars. So they just have to do with something you use with your foot. For sol, solis, which means sun, we have solar, and this just refers to the sun. And then vox, vocis, which means voice, we have the derivative vocal, and vocal is using your voice. When you're vocal, you are using your vocal cords or your voice. All right, go back and underline the Latin root for those derivatives. All right, great job today. This lesson was probably not too challenging because we were simply reviewing third declension case endings and declining in the third declension. So again, good time to just make sure you solidify everything we've learned so far in this unit. And also you can use this week to work on those 4 sentence patterns that we've learned so far. Learning how to diagram them and how to apply them. So again, all of that is found in the appendix of your book on pages 93 to 106. So let's just briefly together review the 4 sentence patterns that we've learned so far. They are number 1, subject and verb. Number 2, the second sentence pattern is subject, verb, direct object. The third sentence pattern and the fourth sentence pattern are ones that we learned in the last lesson, and they are subject, linking verb, predicate adjective, and the fourth is subject, linking verb, predicate nominative. So work hard on making sure you remember and you know the differences between those 4 sentence patterns, and you can identify them and diagram them. Great work. Make sure you complete your workbook exercises. Come back to the DVD as always and do the oral drill exercise before you take your quiz. See you next time.